Hello. Ever since I became aware of MGTOW, the one most common characterization has been woman hater. Outsiders often stumble on MGTOW channels and they hear, "Women suck, they screw men, avoid women like the plague," etc., etc. Today I want to address this characterization of MGTOW as women haters. The first thing to understand is that MGTOW think differently than most people. They've been awakened to the reality of society. If you're not MGTOW, you have a certain set of assumptions you've obtained from your background. We're all born into a family of some kind, whether it's to a foster family, a traditional nuclear family, or loose group of unofficial caretakers. Whatever family you're born into, they immediately try to orient you to what the expected and accepted behaviors are in your particular society. If you're born into a cult family, this will be more intrusive than, say, if you're raised by a gay couple with very loose standards of accepted behavior. Whatever it is, the teachings they provide and enforce to you are going to be what define your mind. As children, we are blank slates. As we grow and interact with our environments, we develop certain assumptions about the world and society. Now, what are those standard modes of thought within the West? The West is a relatively civilized society. All people are expected to adhere to basic courtesy rules. It would be unwise to walk up to a complete stranger and strike them in the face for no reason. It's also considered unacceptable to talk shit about somebody's mother, for example. Now, these are basic rules we can all accept, right? Sure, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. Empathy is the name of the game for the most part. I don't think anyone can disagree with this. I don't want to be struck in the face, so I can empathize with others receiving this treatment and have no problem accepting this restriction on my own behavior. That's how empathy basically works. Now, there's an undercurrent which automatically follows this type of conditioning. Before I address this undercurrent, I want to clarify something. The undercurrent exists because of a logical fallacy. The basic idea of empathy, which we considered earlier, is easily understandable and acceptable. It's logical. Anybody with a brain can accept it because it makes sense. But the undercurrent, the unspoken expectations that naturally follow as history unfolds, become connected to that original expectation, even though the undercurrent couldn't stand on its own merits. For example, I tell you, don't touch my car, because I love my car and it's my property. You agree, because you don't want me touching your car and want your own property rights to be respected. But what if I said, since you aren't going to touch my car, you also have to love the color of my car? You look at my car, a lime green Pinto, and you think, but I hate lime green, you say. Hey, I hate your car color. Of course, I get offended and slash your tires and take a dump on your car's hood. You offended me, and thus I feel entitled to cause real damage by breaking the accepted behavior I demand of you. See how this works? There's a basic acceptable logic behind the property right, but there's also an undercurrent of required behavior that somehow gets connected to it. Now, the undercurrent of society I'm addressing here is the expected treatment of women. We can all accept that one should avoid assaulting another person. But there's an undercurrent of expected behavior. This is called thought crime. Western society has become corrupted with thought crime legislation. Now, that said, why do MGTOW get characterized as women haters? If I was to say all women are evil, people in society would automatically punish me for breaking the rules of thought. They would virtue signal to their peers that they aren't like me, and it would now be acceptable to punish me for violating the laws of thought. But these laws aren't written down. They're accepted as cultural norms. Women are to be protected at all times by society. Women are inherently valued. How did this value judgment come to be? As young boys grow up, they're told girls may assault them, and they're told to never touch a girl for any reason. Religious people teach young boys that sex is bad outside of marriage, and a lot of times their sexual development can be stunted because of this. Boys are categorically shamed for being weak if they complain about a female's behavior. If a girl gets special treatment and a boy complains, he's called weak or a complainer. If a girl makes a complaint, she is automatically attended to by boys and adults trying to make her feel better. It's an accepted norm that all women are to be perpetually happy. It's also an accepted norm that all males are to be stoic. If a boy or a man has a problem, they're expected to fix it themselves. If a girl or a woman has a problem, she may cry out for assistance, and this is never shamed and almost always attended to. Crying and emotional displays allow girls to manipulate others in society, and the West has decided over the decades that this is acceptable behavior. I think you can see the obvious difference. There's a standard of thought legislation. Not only is a woman's cries for attention and assistance accepted as legitimate, but the response by others in society are also subject to this thought legislation. If a woman or girl is crying because she feels bad, boys are expected to provide comfort or assistance. See my video, The Double Standard from Hell's Vagina, for more on this topic. Now, that's the basic setup. Thought legislation is an unwritten code of conduct. If society becomes aware of your thoughts, and those thoughts run counter to the accepted norm, you receive physical consequences. This is also called political correctness, but it goes deeper than that. MGTOW have become aware of this situation and call it out for what it is. If I were to say, all men are evil, someone might pipe up and say, well, I can see why you think that, but there are good men out there. Have you ever heard a woman say, all men are pigs? What's your knee-jerk reaction? Do you lash out and say, you're being a cunt! How dare you say such a thing? I imagine you give it a shrug. We've all heard this phrase before, and it's become kind of a joke. But if men say, all women are evil, I imagine your reaction is quite different to this phrase. Deep down, we want to virtue signal that we won't stand for such a thought assault on our most prized humans. Women have obtained a natural protected class status, and MGTOW recognize this. So they call it out for what it is. But society still lives under the standard thought crime laws and can't imagine anything else. In fact, they feel to imagine anything else is to accept their own shame as a thought crime law breaker. This is Propaganda 101, people. Get the population to police itself, and you don't even need to write laws. I'm sure you've heard of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which establishes freedom for a person to speak freely without the fear of imprisonment. Great! Now I know I can say anything I want, right? Wrong. The First Amendment does not guarantee freedom for the individual. It only halts the government from acting. It does not provide a shield for the individual. It only provides a legal argument if you are ever imprisoned or fined for speaking your mind. Everything else is fair game. The Constitution, as Obama has said, is a group of negative liberties. That is, it restricts the government from action. It doesn't free the individual to act. Free speech is not what most people think it is. So back to the social undercurrent. Why are MGTOW seen as woman haters? I think to answer this question, we must compare like with like. MGTOW are on a higher mental plane. Taken as a group, you compare how they think with how society at large thinks. Society is under a certain group of accepted and expected behaviors of thought. MGTOW are not. If a MGTOW states all women are evil, he obviously holds this view for a reason. Perhaps once you ask him to explain his statement, he says, what I mean is, all women are capable of being evil, and because they are fundamentally mental manipulators, I feel mental manipulation is an evil act, and thus I feel all women are evil fundamentally. Now, while you may not agree with this statement or explanation, you can see the logic behind it. However, if you're not MGTOW, and you have not become awakened, it doesn't matter to you why that MGTOW holds that thought. All that matters is the fact that he holds that thought. He's broken a thought crime law, and thus deserves to be shunned and shamed publicly. Now, society at large wants to label people. If they see enough MGTOW make such statements, they will necessarily define the group as women haters. But what they fail to realize is, MGTOW do not live under the standard thought crime legislation. Each individual MGTOW lives by his own code he writes for himself. It is impossible to understand how one can do this when one lives under thought crime legislation. You must first be awoken to your own mental restrictions before you could possibly understand how a MGTOW thinks. Perhaps you're familiar with the concept of classical conditioning. Ivan Pavlov did a classical experiment. It's called Pavlov's dog, I'm sure you've all heard of it, where he was able to make a dog salivate when the dog heard a bell ring. Dogs do not normally do this, in case you weren't aware. First, the dog would get a morsel of food. Next, the dog would get a morsel of food and he would hear a bell ring. Then the bell would ring before the food arrived. All this time the dog would salivate in preparation for the food. Over time, the ringing bell would be all that would be needed to cause the dog to salivate, even when he never got the food after the bell rings. Now the dog starts salivating simply by hearing the bell. There are other manipulation tactics, but this is the type of thing that goes on with people. Boys see a girl crying. He may see other boys rush to help her, and then they're given a reward for their efforts in that the girl hugs or kisses them. The boy associates helping the girl with morsels of affection, which the boy wants. So he starts to attend a girl's cries for attention. Over time, the boy only needs to hear someone shame a woman for her behavior, and the boy, now a man, acts on his learned impulse to protect the woman. He's salivating for the bell. Even though he will never get the morsel of affection for his actions, he still salivates, or in this case, white knights. He shames the MGTOW for the statement, all women are evil, even though there's no girl to help, no hug or kiss to enjoy. Are MGTOW a bunch of women haters? Fuck no. Women are no longer a concern to a MGTOW. MGTOW don't salivate for the bell. They're free of the bell's suggestion. But society is not. Society still salivates when the shrill cry of a woman is heard. You can see the difference between these two groups. MGTOW have freed themselves from society's conditioning efforts. Mental freedom is not easily obtained. You must literally tell yourself that you're wrong. We naturally feel shame for being wrong, and somehow must overcome the learned behavior to deny our own false assumptions. But once you overcome, you reap the benefits of seeing the world as it actually is. Are all women evil? No more than men. But the double standard we're all conditioned to now puts women in the manipulator category, and men are subject to this manipulation. How do you overcome a manipulator? You call them on their bullshit. And as she's sitting there crying, how do you fight your internal drive to comfort her? How do you learn to accept that a woman's happiness is not your priority? You must condition yourself. You must recondition your mind to respond to a new reality, one that has rules which you write from scratch. That's a big part of going your own way. You are now captain of the ship, and you decide whether the rudder turns right or left, whether the sails are open or closed. You and you alone bear the consequences for running the ship onto the rocks. But the truth is, you always bore these consequences. The difference is, once you've gone your own way, you recognize this. You recognize that you alone bear the burden of your own rules you've written for yourself. This is, in fact, part of the reconditioning process. Mental freedom is a jewel of priceless value. To live free in your own mind is the most valuable thing one can aspire to. You no longer live under the assumed norms we all develop throughout early life. For example, suppose I said, "But you'll be alone. Nobody wants to be alone. It's so lonely." We've all heard this at one point or another, and I think by now it's accepted as a standard expected thought. I think differently. In fact, we are all alone at all times. You can be alone in a crowd. It all depends on your mental state. Do you think you're alone, or do you think you're together? In fact, you're always alone. Here's an experiment. Go to a crowd of friends, people you know, and cover your eyes, close your ears, and ensure nobody touches you. What's the difference between this and being in a room alone? There's no difference as far as you can tell. What distinguishes these two situations is how we individually view them. I remember going to a strip club a long time ago, sitting in the back and simply watching the room. I might as well have not been there, but I was there. I was observing the room, physically in the room, but I was alone. I was never approached by anyone, but I was physically there. Is there a difference? No. We're all alone, always alone, at all times. Of course, someone will counter, but when you have someone who cares about you, you aren't alone. You matter to someone. But I disagree. Simply mattering to another person doesn't change the fact that you're still alone. Imagine you matter to someone while in solitary confinement. You're alone in the cell. You know someone cares about you on the outside, but you're still alone. You may feel that mattering to someone makes you more part of the world, or whatever, but it doesn't change your physical situation. Living in a cave, or living in a community, is exactly the same thing. The only difference is proximity. So the standard argument that we all need someone is a false assumption, in my view. It's part of the thought legislation apparatus, the standard expected thought behavior. Now sure, these thought behaviors are things that bind a society. Societal norms make one feel as if they're part of something larger than themselves. When I was in the military, I had that same sensation. Truth is, it was all a lie, a simple suggestion. It was a mental manipulation tactic. Even today, as I drive past a military base, I feel like I've returned home. But I haven't. It's a good feeling, but I've awoken to the reality. It is what it is. I'm no more part of that military base than the commander is my personal friend. We have learned that having a role in society is necessarily valuable. Is it? It can be, but it isn't necessarily so. If you're trying to gain perspective while in that role, you can obtain insight about the real world through your experiences, but if you're simply following after the bell, because you're supposed to have a role, if you're angrily responding to a distasteful remark about a woman, because that's what you're supposed to do, you aren't doing anything but salivating. You're an automaton blindly salivating to the bell of society. Maybe that MGTOW who thinks women are evil has something to teach you. Maybe you might not know everything about everything. Maybe, just maybe, there's more to learn. Instead of licking the pussy 'cause she commanded you to heel, stop and think before acting. Look at yourself. Are you proud of your submissive action? Why don't you stand up, look at that woman with tears streaming down her face, black lines of mascara across her cheeks, anguished cries of sadness ringing out, and walk away. Leave her in agony. Don't even look back as her cries of sorrow make your stomach churn and knees jerk. You want to run back, embrace the wretched thing, and make her happy once again. You want to wipe away her tears and see her pretty smile nuzzled in your shoulder. Walk away and see if you're man enough to resist yourself. See if you own your own mind. The power of the woman's tears is strong, and men are weak in the face of a crying woman. Learn to overcome your own liabilities, and there may be hope for you. One day, you may hear a bell and notice your mouth is dry. I hope all men can find this kind of freedom. Please remember, your mind is who you are. Do you own yourself? It's your birthright. Go your own way and reclaim it for yourself, or stay on your knees as she scratches your ears. Will you be a man or a slave? The choice is yours. Thanks for listening.